And now let's get to it. Our panelists include people who stutter and people who do not, and each are practicing creating safe spaces for people who stutter in their work and everyday lives, from the classroom to the newsroom to the workplace. What are ways we can all do to create safe spaces for people who stutter? Sometimes just one simple act could go a long way. So our first panelist is Dr. Rick Herder. He's a professor of communication studies at Southwest Minnesota State University in Marshall, Minnesota. He teaches topics in basic public speaking, teaching methods for students who are planning to teach secondary language arts. He is trained as a rhetorician and has published work in the area of corporate protest rhetoric. Next, we have Mike Meany. He's a person who stutters and a technology researcher based in San Jose, California. And third panelist, Mariam Elba, is a person who stutters and a research reporter supporting ProPublica's local newsroom initiatives. She is an adjunct professor at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York, where she teaches a course in advanced news research methods. So yes, welcome panelists. So excited to have you here. My first question, and let's start with Mariam. Can you describe your connection to stuttering?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here and to see some people from yesterday, and to see some colleagues and friends here as well. So yeah, my connection to stuttering. It's a really interesting question. I was thinking about this earlier in the day, Maya, but yeah, like as like a lifelong stutterer, like I've been stuttering since I first started to speak as a child. I think sort of like my stutter itself, my connection to it has been kind of changing and fluid. Of course, there were times when I was growing up where, like, there was no connection really. I was kind of trying to like put it to the side and like thinking it would I would kind of like grow out of it at some point. And yeah, when it became clear that like this is something that that I will kind of carry for the long term, or for the rest of my life. Sorry, I have the window open, and I'm sorry if it's a bit if it's a bit noisy, but my connection to stuttering now is that I think I learn a lot of things from my stutter. It's kind of it's taught me a lot of things throughout the years, and I think it continues to like teach me a lot of things. I think it teaches me to be patient with myself. If my stutter is severe in a particular situation, I've like learned to kind of give myself time when I need it, both in my speech and kind of outside the realm of my speech. And I think also, as people who stutter, we have the chance to also be teachers in that way, where we kind of like have like where we might encourage others to be a patient, like not just patient with us, but like, you know, to kind of slow down and take our time, like with our speech, and also just with like everyday routine things that might be similar to speech. Um, so yeah, like my connection to stuttering now is like, I think it gives me a lot of small gifts. Admittedly, I don't always see it as a gift if I'm blocking when I'm like introducing myself to someone for the first time, or trying to like make a coffee order when there's like a huge line behind me. But like, you know, it's a thing that it's like not just a thing that I deal with every day, but it's also a condition that has given me a lot of gifts over the years.
Thank you for that. And now I'm going to pass it the same question. Can you describe your connection to stuttering to Mike Meany?
Thank you, Maya, and thanks a lot for your answer, Miriam. And a lot of what you said resonates with me. I think my stutter used to be much more pronounced, and actually M's were the hardest sound for me to say. So Mike Meany is my name, and that was really unlucky for school when I had to introduce myself every day, or at least at the start of the school year. It's quite mild now. And I'm not sure if it's mild because all of the techniques that I developed over the course of my life to hide my stutter are just so embedded and ingrained in how I think and operate. You know, very small things like tapping my feet and flicking my hands and turning my head, and all these little things that I use to unblock myself. And you know, just learning a lot of words and sort of always having this like repository of phrases and different ways to say what I was going to say. And it's quite mild now. But my connection to it is like, it's still a very core part of my identity. And like, in some ways I understand it as like a very central defining feature of who I am and like my life. Yeah, I guess I've come to also view it as a gift. That was not always the case, and it's not always the case now, but you know, for whatever reason, I ended up trying to like do a lot of public speaking, like as I got older, and I was involved in student government in high school and at university, and I got to give some speeches that were in front of pretty large audiences, and I always stuttered through them, and I just tried to like assert myself in spite of it and sort of make space for it. And those were like really powerful experiences. I think as I've had to encounter other adversity in life, it's like I'm like super primed to like fail all the time, because I fail almost every time I open my mouth. And so like iterating and like constantly evolving and having a very growth mindset approach to just experiencing life in general is how I experience my life, because that's how I experience like every minute that I communicate. There's just this constant fail and change and iterate and find ways to say what I'm saying. So yeah, it's a super deep question. Maya, and thanks for asking it. Yeah, and I'll say, I guess I'll just end with, I never knew other people who stuttered. I mean, like, and I just am so grateful that like Maya and others have like led these initiatives, because the loneliness that I felt, which was palpable in school growing up, has been so dramatically lessened by meeting and stuttering with like dozens of other people. It's just, I can't tell you, and it's strengthened like I feel way more connected to my stutter now than I ever have. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing that. And now I'm going to ask the same question to our next panelist, Rick Herder.
Hi, I'm Rick, and the first thing that I want to say is that I just really feel humbled and honored to be here and to hear Mike and Maya's stories. I mean, it's astonishing to me, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why. I have taught public speaking in more or less, a regular fashion for close to 4 decades, and for most on the high school level first, and then eventually at the university level. And for most of that time, I was coaching high school speakers on the speech team. I was occasionally teaching public speaking in my classes, and then for about a decade taught that as a big part of my load as a high school teacher. And through all of those years teaching students public speaking, I never had students who stuttered in my class. At least from my perspective, I didn't have students who stuttered in my classroom, and other people with other professionals who were doing the same job reported similar things. Now, of course, over the years, I had an occasional student. I remember one student, my second or third year of speaking, whom we referred to the speech language pathologist on staff. And that student, who to me seemed obviously to stutter, came back and said, no, they said I don't have a stutter. And so I just had these really a few ambiguous, confusing experiences with it. And it's obvious now that that there were students in my classrooms who stuttered, but they were clearly hiding in plain sight. And when my son Carl became a speech language pathologist, he now works for the American Institute of Stuttering, and he's a board certified stuttering specialist. And when as I began to learn alongside my son, and he and I began to do some research on this and gather the stories of students who stuttered, what I came to realize was that those students were there all the time. And when I started talking in my classrooms the first day about ADA accommodations, and I talked to them about just what stuttering is, and gave them some basic facts on it, and said, if you live with this, please, you don't have to hide in my classroom. We can talk about this, and I will do my best to make appropriate accommodations. And suddenly students started coming out of the woodwork. They started stepping out of the shadows. And there weren't a lot, but, in terms of, but I think that probably every semester I would have a couple of students who would step forward, which at a very small university, such as the one where I teach, that's a significant number. And I got to know a number of those students quite well. And we can talk more about some of the things that have occurred in regard to making those accommodations. But I want to stress a couple of things. One is that in my campus, in our Department of Communication, or Communication Studies program, rather, we put a disability statement on all of our syllabi, and we make sure that students know that if they are living with a stutter or any other disability, that they can go to disability services and request appropriate accommodations. But I'm really sad to report, I just double checked this afternoon just to make sure that I had this, that my information was up to date. But the National Communication Association is the professional organization to which people like me belong, people who study communication in general and people who teach public speaking. Most of them are going to be members of the National Communication Association. And on their main website, they have a page where they offer representative syllabi from all of the various subdisciplines. And so I looked again today, and they had 9 sample syllabi posted up there for public speaking. They had 4 sample syllabi up there for coursework, for methodology courses for people who are planning to become language arts teachers and be certified to teach public speaking on the secondary level. And of those 9 syllabi that were, do my count right now, 13 syllabi total. Of those 13 syllabi, not one included a disability statement. And so I'm very proud of my the organization to which I belong, the National Communication Association, for the leadership they have shown in any number of areas in regard to human rights. Unfortunately, however, we're not showing leadership in this area. And there's a whole history to the relationship between speech language pathology and communication studies. And we can talk about a little bit of that if you're interested. But I will say that for our part, Carl and I have been doing some work, and we're hoping to publish some things that might help to move our discipline along a little bit and help them to become aware of the need for training people who are going to be teaching public speaking and making appropriate accommodations for those who stutter. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, like that really calls to mind a memory I have from college when I got my minor in professional writing, and part of that, under the writing umbrella of programs, that there was a public speaking class. And it was with one of my favorite teachers, and I was so excited for it. And at the last minute, I just decided I just dropped out, because as much as I wanted to like learn how to become a public speaker, and I love talking on a mic, like since I was little, I've just always had this like urge to like grab a mic and start like singing or talking. And I've just like, that's always been something I just have thrived for, and I've had this like pull towards. And so, but then I just dropped out the last minute, because I was like, I don't want to put myself through 2 days a week to having to like go up in front of a crowd and like do a speech. Like that just seemed like torture in a way, because I'd have to constantly just work extra hard to like make sure my stutter didn't come out. And so, and in hindsight, I like knew if I would have talked to my teacher, like he would have been very understanding. But it's like, there's that step, I think, that's missing, that disconnect of like, sometimes like if I would have seen something like either in a syllabus or something that would have made me feel more safe and comfortable, maybe I would have taken that class. And so yeah, I think it's wonderful what you're doing, Rick. And there's just, I think there's a huge opportunity. Like I'm even thinking like a petition of some sort to like really try to get as many public speaking teachers as possible to like commit to having those statements or something, you know, like that's just my advocacy brain popping up, but I'm only one person, so don't take me up on that yet. But I did kind of want to talk more about the relationship between public speaking and being a person who stutter, because it definitely has lots to do with this theme of safe spaces. And so, Mike, I want to ask you, like, I know you've done a lot of public speaking, but what was so different about speaking at the rally at City Hall last week for you?
Yeah, thank you, Maya, and thank you, Rick and Carl, for all of your advocacy. It's really great to hear. And it's unfortunate that the Communications Association maybe isn't as up to speed on including that disability statement. So we appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, so I spoke about this a little bit at the rally. The first time I had to public speak was in Mass to read the gospel, and I stuttered, and I was in second grade, and people started laughing, and I started crying, and was reading the gospel and crying in Mass, which is a really unusual image, I guess. I don't know. I don't think I've seen something like that since. And my family, of course, like, remembered that. And then I was the president of my student government in high school, and I had to get up and say the prayer and the pledge at my graduation, and I stayed up all night practicing, and I like wrote out the speech in big font, and I had every inflection, and I did it, and I didn't stutter, and my whole family was holding their breath, because they were just like, it was this weird, 15 years later to see that. And since then I've grown much more comfortable with speaking publicly. I think what was so powerful and so different about City Hall is that I've never shared the stage with other people who stuttered. And like, it was really beautiful just to see everyone walk in and sort of own their space and own their voice. And to know that, like, how they were going to speak was not going to be unusual and different from how other people were, but it was going to be the norm. And it was just so inspiring to share in the courage of everyone who was there, and then to have a public leader like Dean Preston and others there in support. I mean, it was phenomenal. I mean, I've never experienced something like that. And yeah, it's hard to express how meaningful it is. And it's like, the podium and the microphone are like the things of nightmares for a stutterer, right? Like, these are things that, like, that's like the weird stuff that pops up in my dreams still, right? It's like a microphone and a podium. And there we were, like 7 of us, just like rocking it. And it was so cool. And I just like wish my, second grade self like could have seen that. So it was really special.
Yeah, and that's why I want as many people as possible. I know we're all at different stages in our journey, and we're not all ready to like share our voices, and that's totally okay. But just the experience of being up there as a person who stutters with others in the community, it really felt very safe up there, because if I stuttered, it's okay. I had my community literally standing behind me. Like, it was like this out of body experience. And I want other people to like tap into that power inside of them. And, whether it's passing a local resolution in their community and using that as a way to like get up on the podium, or telling your story like in any medium. It's just like the most it's a very powerful way to just heal, I think, because like, but at the same time, it's like, it took me 29 years to be at this moment. And I know not everyone is there and it takes time. And so I totally get that, but it's just like the feeling, I hope everyone can experience it one day. And I do want to talk to Miriam again, just because being a journalist and being someone that teaches journalism, like I can't even though like I remember like my dream when I was little was to be a broadcast journalist, and I thought that would never happen. But like the fact that it's Miriam, you're able to like do this job, and like, and so I kind of just want you to share like your relationship with creating safe spaces, being both in the newsroom and also being a teacher at a journalism school.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like if you asked like high school me, like, you know, what I would be doing like 10 years from now, or like yeah, I like the last thing I would have guessed is that I would be in journalism, and also that I would be like standing in front of a classroom every like couple of weeks to like teach journalism. So yeah, like my path to journalism was kind of accidental, I guess, but like it kind of fit with what my interests were and what I wanted to do. And like I remember very like distinctly like thinking like when I was like in a college and like figuring out what I like wanted to do, like, oh well, one major is absolutely that like I like won't do is like, you know, journalism, because that's going to require like a lot of talking to people, and like that sounds like exhausting. But here we are. I would say like in terms of fostering or creating safe a safe, or just like, you know, like comfortable like working space as a person who stutters. For me, it started when I had when I had first started my internship at the nation 5 years ago. That was kind of like it was a practice run, not just like career wise, but also just like, okay, like in terms of like very deliberately thinking, you know, how do I like tell like my supervisor, my teammates that like, you know, I have this speech impediment, and you know, like it's, and like, you know, like if I like, you know, may not speak immediately in meetings, or like, you know, make a lot of book slots for like the phone room, it like to kind of just be like in like a space like by myself when making phone calls. Like yeah, it was kind of like the first time where I had to like very like deliberately like think about all of that. And I think the key to kind of making a safe space for yourself in a newsroom, and really in any workplace, is to just kind of like and like it's hard, right? Because I think, you know, Maya, you like brought up a good point that like everyone is in like a different place with regards to their journey as a person who stutters, and like, you know, being open about your stutter is like, you know, not a place where everyone is at. But for me, taking that step and like kind of leaning into that vulnerability, even though I don't always want to, actually has very big like payoff. You find that, you know, you're not thinking about your stutter as much when you're, you know, just like chatting with your colleagues. You're like not thinking about your stutter as much when you want to like contribute things in like when you want to make contributions in meetings, like you're not hesitating, or like you feel like a bit more comfortable maybe to ask for accommodations. Like you know, a lot of offices, like a lot of offices are like open plan, and like you know, speaking for myself, the phone is a really you know, like just like speaking on the phone is really like hard as a stutterer, and like talking out in the open, like I don't know if I would be able to get like words out. So like, you know, I like made like a request like for like whenever I needed to like make calls to sources, if I could use the phone, or if I could use some other like, you know, empty office or something. And like, you know, I found that a lot of my colleagues were very understanding, and like, you know, it's like, and like it like doesn't, and like you like don't have to kind of like say much more beyond just like you know, hey, I have a speech impediment. Speaking on the phone is a bit difficult to do in an open office. Like, do you mind if I, you know, like, you know, take the phone room for like the next hour or so. Like just like very like simple things like that. And like it'll and like it will like, and like it will pay off. And like now it's just like a very like natural thing that I do, as you know, I've gone through like a few, I've like worked in a few in a few newsrooms at this point, and you know, like now it's just something that I like, it just kind of comes like naturally to just tell people that, like, you know, like if they don't know me, that like I have that I that I have a stutter, and that it like it takes me like, you know, a bit of time to get my words out. And just one more thing, even like when I'm like on the phone, like talking to sources, like when I was a fact checker, or like my job now as like a research reporter will sometimes require, say, like phone calls to like state courthouses, for example, if I'm trying to find particular records. Like I've like sort of developed like techniques for myself where like I write like a very you know, very like loose script of like what I want to ask the person on the other end of the phone at the courthouse. So like even if I am stuttering like severely, like I have the script in front of me to like stay grounded a bit. And yeah, I almost always start phone calls, like cold calls like that, by just saying like, hey, I speak with a chronic stutter, and it takes me a bit of time to get my words out, so I appreciate your patience. And you know, most of the time, like the vast majority of the time, like people are like, okay. And then, you know, it's, yeah, it's like, I say this and like I recognize it's not easy to do, but I think you'll find more understanding from people than you might think, like amongst your colleagues and your those in your circle. I don't like, I like certainly would not have been able to thrive in thrive as a journalist, and like certainly not as like an adjunct now without like the support of my colleagues, and to kind of make my point, there's a few of them in the room right now listening to this. So yeah, it's not easy, but it has big payoff. And yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I did want to open the space up to one of our attendees who raised their hands earlier, Patrick Manyboon. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's correct. Pretty much everybody, hello, my name is Patrick Manyboon, and I'm a business coach consultant and a public speaker, interestingly. And talking about, having a safe space, public speaking is actually my safe space. And I bring a whole different approach to this because, like you mentioned, that each person is at a different stage, and mine was more of getting to the point where I just got completely fed up, with going home each night and putting my head in my hand and be embarrassed that I stutter in front of somebody, I stutter in front of this girl, or I stutter in front of this person. And for some reason, one day, maybe 15, 16, some years ago, I made a decision that I was going to let somebody else worry more about my stuttering than I would do. And I don't know what happened, whether whatever your spiritual belief is, something happened, some kind of transformation happened, and my whole life just opened up. Because the way I approached it was more of like, was like, pretty much that I don't care anymore what you think. I'm going to be me. And since then, I got into Toastmasters, went to a speech contest, against a guy who had been to the Toastmaster World Championship of Public Speaking 3 times. And I defeated the guy and came within one contest win of going to the World Championship. And then I started to focus more on connection and confidence versus fluency. And that is where I, to be honest with you guys, I've been confused because it seemed that speech therapy focused so much on fluency, which I don't know if that's the point. Like in my mind, my goal is not to be fluent. My goal is to be confident and connect, because if I didn't stutter, I still have those 2 things I have to work through. And then with the fluency, I'm in a group with nice people having a conversation, and I have to be thinking about easy onsets, prolongation, and get into another habit that I have to break. But my transformation started, look, I completely understand the situation, because personally, I was this guy who, right in high school, I was the top of my class. And I almost skipped my own high school graduation because I was told that I was going to speak. Came close to, if it was not for my school principal, I would have skipped my graduation. And when I look back on all those regrets, I just decided, let somebody else worry about it. And the point I want to make is to, where is the sweet spot between advocacy and getting to the point where we master ourselves and say, enough is enough. I'm going to be me and let somebody else worry about it.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was extremely powerful. And, you know, that's honestly partly the reason I started Proud Stutters, because I was fed up with people. I was just fed up with, yeah, the feeling of just letting my stutter stop me from doing what I really wanted to do. And that's like sharing my voice and helping tell stories. And, you know, I have a story that I've been working on around wanting to be a broadcast journalist, that I did a reading last week at a book festival around this story. And it's just like, it's just a message that like, it's time that, like, for me, like, I'm just sick of this, constant overanalyzation of myself. And I'm just going to tell my stories on my own terms. Thank God there's podcasting, because you literally, anyone could start a podcast, anyone. It's like, so, you know, I'm just so grateful that podcasting exists, because it's allowed, there's no barrier there. There's no gatekeeper to tell me what to do. Like, I'm literally doing it on my own terms. And it's like the most amazing feeling. And I feel like you did something similar. And I just want to respond to the thing you said about speech pathology. And, you know, like I've said this before, like I had a traumatic experience when I was in speech therapy. It was 20 years ago. And the reason was because, yes, it was a fluency type of speech therapy, but there are speech therapists out there on this call that it's up to their client on what they want to work on. If they want to work on a fluency, then awesome. If they want to work on just like goal setting and confidence building and speaking openly, like that's okay. It's just, I think there's a lot of evolution in how speech therapy has transformed. And I was like that too. I was like speech therapist. Every time I thought about them, I like had this negative image in my brain. But as soon as I met the first speech therapist that kind of opened me up that there's other ways to help people who stutter, that's when I was like, okay, like let's go. Let's like come into my circle. Like I love all those types of speech therapists. And I did just want to open it up. I know we're almost at time. If there's any speech therapists out there that just kind of want to respond to what Patrick just said, feel free to do so, because I think having speech therapists as voices on here would be really awesome. And I see Carl's hand.
Hi, Maya, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm using my computer and my phone to make sure that my audio is good. I just wanted to take an opportunity. I didn't know if I would bother trying to jump in tonight or not, given that you had invited my dad to speak, and maybe there will be another opportunity for him to take questions or share on accommodations and whatnot. But I think since you're bringing it up, Maya, I think it's important for me to jump in and just share that, and Bailey Levis actually covered this when you had him on your podcast near the end of the season. But yeah, there's been quite a movement among our profession, and we're little by little doing a better job of allowing speech therapy for stuttering to look a lot like talk therapy for stuttering. And it's we're learning to focus less on the easy onsets that Patrick was referring to, and the fluency driven fluency results oriented therapy, and looking at people who stutter, who are living this day to day, and looking at the lived experience and trying to help people consider how they want to handle speaking in different situations. And I think the work that we're learning to do helps people to get from whatever state they're in to where Patrick is at. And I think one of the ways that we do this is we help people to advocate for themselves so that they can little by little create that safe space for themselves so that they can feel more capable of being more authentically themselves in different environments and more capable of speaking confidently, whether it's in a public speaking classroom or a social setting or everything in between, and most of the speech language pathologists that I interact with regularly at the American Institute for Stuttering and colleagues elsewhere are doing therapy in a way now where it's actually rare for us to start with a speech technique. A lot of folks are doing avoidance reduction therapy and cognitive restructuring and honestly sitting around talking about what it's like to stutter and how they're going to handle specific situations, specific to like what Miriam, what you were saying about all of those little things that you've figured out that people are actually pretty understanding if you'll just ask for a little accommodation, that people will provide those things. And little by little, you learn that you can feel more and more comfortable in the different speaking situations that you face by taking on a little bit more each time you face that situation. So I'll step out and I'm happy to carry on if anyone has questions, but I'll let the conversation continue with others.
Thank you. And I just want to open it up to other folks that want to chime in. I know this is a hot topic in the stuttering community, and I know there's at least one aspiring speech language pathologist. So just know that there are folks like that on this call that are aspiring to be speech therapists. So it's wonderful to kind of have a mix of seasoned speech therapists and those that are, learning from these spaces. So I just want to open it up to anyone else that would like to speak. I know you're out there. Don't be scared.
Looks like Debbie. I think
Okay.
Debbie will.
So the famous Debbie.
Hey there. I am a speech therapist, and I stutter too. And I've always stuttered growing up. And I think everybody thinks because I stutter and became a speech therapist that I work with folks that stutter, and I rarely do. My love is to work with kids that are unable to speak at all. So I just I love doing that and bringing the gift of speech. I guess one thing I would say about stuttering is that to me it's about a lack of control. It's a speech challenge which is out of control, that you don't always know when you're going to stutter, who you're going to stutter with, when and where. And my love is to bring control to others where they feel like they can have a safe space to communicate in any way they want to. So I probably would agree with everybody on the show that we all find our place in the world in our journey. And I never knew anybody growing up that stuttered. I never went to undergraduate school with anybody that stuttered, and in graduate school, I did not know anybody. So I kind of felt alone in the world. But I just think the best part of being a speech therapist is giving control to others about being able to communicate the way they want to, with who they want to, and where they want to.
Thank you, Debbie. And if you haven't listened to our bonus episode yet, Debbie was on that. She was one of the first people to send in a voice memo. And she really, if you want to learn more about Debbie's story, you should listen to the most recent episode, because it's quite a good story. And we are closing in on the end of the hour. I had something else I wanted to say, but it just got lost in my brain. But does anyone want to close this out? We have 2 minutes left, and I don't want to say that the last word. I want someone to say that the last word, and don't worry, you're not rushed. I'm sure we all have like an extra few minutes to stay and listen to whoever wants to say the last word.
I can chime in with a very brief last word that I think is like you know, or like that is like a that is like a mantra to me when I'm, you know, kind of getting in my head when I'm in like the middle of like a stuttering a block, or in a very, you know, high pressure situation in front of people on the phone, you name it, where like, you know, and I think that like this is very similar to what Patrick brought up, but like it's important as a person who stutters, if you feel like you're taking up a lot of time trying to speak, or if you're taking up a lot of like a lot of like someone's time, like it's important to kind of stray away from that mindset and instead like embrace that you like deserve other people's time. You like might need more time than others to speak, but you know, it's the time that you need in order to get to communicate. So you have a right to that time. That's all I'll say.